Thank you all for joining today. I know we had moved this meeting originally from a few weeks back due to the winter storm, but we are full speed ahead, and I'm glad everyone could join us today. This session will be recorded, so if you are not able to attend the full thing, or if you have any team members that might have had a conflict, please let them know that the recording will be made available, and anyone that had registered will be receiving a link to that. We're going to go ahead and get started, though. My name is Trevor Wilder, and I am the Customer Success Manager for the state. So what we're going to be doing throughout the course of today's user group, we're going to first hear from the Office of Technology Services about some of the exciting new Tableau resources that they are making available to you as users. Then we're going to be hearing from the Department of Education about the Louisiana School Reopening Dashboard and some of the great work they're doing to assist with the return to school initiatives across the state. And then for our last session, we'll be having our partner XeoMatrix do a training on Calculations 101. As a reminder, we had sent out a survey following the last user group, and some of the feedback from you guys was you wanted more training on calculations. So we are delivering on that, and I would just please ask you to keep filling out the surveys, as there will be another one coming out following the user group. Like I said, my name is Trevor Wilder. I'm the Customer Success Manager, but I also wanted to introduce the rest of the Tableau account team. We have Joseph Delaney, your Solutions Engineer for any technical related questions, and Colin Jones, who is the Account Executive and the overall account owner within Louisiana. So reach out to any of us, and if we're not the right person on the account team, we're still happy to help and put you in touch with the person that is. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Chris Manguno from the Statewide Analytics Division of the Office of Technology Services to introduce some of the new resources that are going to be available to you. Chris? All right, we can see the screen. Chris, you might be on.
Hello, my name is Chris Manguno, and I'm here. I'm going to share today with you a design guide that we have been working on, which will hopefully help with the creation of dashboards in ways that will make it more efficient by standardizing formats for certain charts or for dashboarding aspects, which will hopefully increase the time in which they can be made, and also make them more user-friendly and more user-facing. So the first thing is just sort of, we're going to start simple with just the overall structure of a dashboard. It's going to want to have a title, so that way people will know what is being presented and the general topic of what will be answered with this dashboard. And then the other things which can be on there, if a logo is required, if it's a standalone presentation and you want them to know, who is presenting this, what's the source of the data, having the logo present will help with that. And then part of the larger design of the standardization of the dashboards, if all users within that department are putting the logo in a similar location, that will help create a consistent user experience. And there are other, if menu items, for example, if there was a question mark icon that was used that would present different or more specific information about an item on the dashboard, if it's a standardized button used across all dashboards, that makes it easier for users to identify and know what to expect when they see that icon. And so this gets in where it really creates, or it requires creating departmental policies in place from the top down in order to create these standardized locations where developers will know where they can go to get the resources that they need, and that they know these are approved resources. And depending upon the situation, is it an internal dashboard for only people within the department, or is this a dashboard that's presenting to the public? There may be different requirements for those when they're created. You can set to help the creators with the design of the dashboard. These procedures can standardize things like, dashboard title font size ranges, just so that way they have an idea of the expected for readability purposes to be in this range. This is the font that we're going to be using. And also, if it's a dashboard that's going to be embedded on a web page, we're going to be looking for it to be this size so it fits within the existing constraints. And then just letting people know where to go for graphics, logos, or icons that have been approved by the department for the use of the dashboards. So that way they know exactly where they need to go or who they need to contact in order to figure out what should be used. And one thing that can help with this is by also creating dashboard templates where some aspects, such as a logo or any other information that needs to be presented, will be already on there to save time. So that way creators aren't having to recreate this information every time they make a dashboard. They already have a starting point to go from, where they're just adding in the actual worksheets that need to be displayed on that dashboard. And the same holds true for individual charts. You can create, once you know how a certain chart is being created and formatted for display, you can create a template workbook for that. And then when you are creating the next instance of a similar chart that will have the same formatting, you can just copy that formatting from the saved template into the one you're using. And so you're not having to go through and apply the same settings over and over again manually. You can just copy them over from the saved location, which will save time and also create a consistent user experience across all dashboards being used. And here are just these are just a very simple blank where you have placeholders for where certain items can go, depending upon the need. But the logo is already present, so that won't have to be reconnected. And it's a blank sort of starting point where the placeholders can be replaced with the actual views being used. And when you're formatting, this, we talk about some strategy where you want to work sort of from the top to the bottom. So you want to format your workbook level items first. You can set, in this workbook, the font used for everything. By default, you can set that. You can set, the size, and then you can also then go and set specific dashboard elements as well. So that way, any dashboards created in this workbook will have those settings applied, so you're not having to apply them to each dashboard that is created. And then worksheet formatting, you can copy a worksheet, the format of a worksheet to an already existing one. Here's some more specific design topics as well, in fonts. By changing the size, the bolding, or the color of the fonts, you can help call out specific pieces of information within a chart, and deciding on, you can set sort of departmental, policies in terms of formatting these. There's a certain size, making sure that they're present, or setting up in templates so that way they will reflect. The next one is color, which is can be used to highlight, in this chart, which is, it's got, a lot of lines in it, which aren't heavily, annotated for what they are. But by having selectors, you can actually have it highlight. If this were tied to another dashboard with something else, you can see where this particular subcategory is relative to the other subcategories without having too much visual clutter. The same thing with color fills. There's, deciding which colors will be used in certain circumstances will help standardize the process. And so that way, when you're designing it, you're not picking the color, you're just applying the color that has already been decided upon. That's one. There are ways in Tableau, you can create custom color palettes to where they will automatically show up in the color picker. So that way they will carry forward across multiple workbooks. And then also another default settings that can be set as well within workbooks are data formatting. So you can set what number format that you want to use, decimal point roundings, by deciding what decimal point is needed for the given dashboard and setting it at a data level, it will apply across the entire dashboard. So it's not having to be set every time that number is added to an additional chart. Same thing with the formatting, deciding, having a decision made in terms of how much, what the design of the chart is. You can have background lines, or if they're not needed, by adding labels, those can be removed. And then other labels can be removed by adding color to identify, depending upon its relation to other graphs in the dashboard. Reformatting tooltips is big because the default ones created by Tableau aren't always as identifying as by making some changes to them. And just setting up more context for, like in this, where it's saying it's in all regions, but you can apply filters and it will give more context to the chart as to what data is actually being displayed in that chart. So that way the user can more easily identify what is being displayed. And then the last item that I'm just gonna bring up quickly is the use of parameters to help with user interactivity. This is just a simple, what are the current goals relative to a sales target? By updating the parameter, the various charts can reflect, and that way it allows for more usability for the dashboard for a wider audience of users. Thank you. Eventually, in the near future, this will be made available on the Team Tableau website. So we'll keep you updated. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Yes, just to echo that, that will be added to the Team Tableau website, which if you have not already seen, we'll be getting some more information about that towards the end of the presentation today. You'll definitely want to bookmark that, is because any of the resources that we're adding in will be added there. So moving on to our next topic. And also, if you have any questions during these presentations, please put them in the chat so I can make sure they get addressed. But yeah, just keep putting them in the chat. But moving on, we're going to be seeing from the Department of Education. Carol Mosley is the Louisiana K-12 E-Rate Director and IT Technical Support Supervisor. And she's going to be presenting on some of the great work that the Department of Education is using Tableau for as the state is returning to school. So with that, I will turn it over to Carol.
Afternoon, everyone. So at the department, we've had, several different challenges of getting information out to both schools, parents, media, just anyone who's wanting to ask where we are in opening our schools and what access our students will have under the pandemic. mainly with virtual learning. Do they have a device? Are they connected? Where are we? So in an effort to answer all the questions that we were getting, we engaged our Tableau team to take our data and help us build out some beginning stages of our information and graphics to share what is happening in our schools. So we started this with these 4 first pages, one around devices, one around connectivity, one that's associated specifically with where our students' schools are and how they are learning, if they're learning in what we're calling a digital learning mode, be it virtual, hybrid, or in person, and then how's that relate to our school systems. So in these pages, we provide a lot more information and detail so that they are able to see what is happening in our schools. I'm hoping that's big enough so y'all can see on the page. So here we give, initially an overall view of where we are with the state and looking at based on those schools that have reported. There are still schools that are reporting regularly, and we are updating this information either periodically for devices and broadband, or when it comes to learning mode on a nightly basis. And in here, we provide information around what does that ratio of devices look like for students, how many students are we supporting, how many devices we had. Prior to the pandemic, we were looking at a 3-to-1 ratio. We're down to a 0.72-to-1 ratio now. So in most school systems, we should see where every child kind of has a device. We're also able to look at what types of devices the students and schools have access to. In here, we are trying to provide more details so you can drill down by the type of computer usage. So we're showing, and I know that may be small on the screen, it may be administrators, classrooms, computer labs, special purpose labs, or just our students. So we can kind of see based on how these are used, how many students are assigned and what that looks like. So we can start kind of drilling through, as well as we can drill through to see how specific school systems are faring on these different criteria. So in this case, we can look at Ascension Parish and where are they in this process and who has these devices based on that criteria, and even drill down further to the specific school. If we wanted to look at just East Ascension High School to see, what do their students have, we can drill down and start looking at what does that look like. And so therefore we're able to share with parents, not only, does my child have a device, how are they getting it, but also, for us, where we are in this process. The next kind of phase that we're looking at, and I'll show the other 3 kind of portal pages, is how did we fund these things that are now changing? So from here, like I said, we've looked at devices. We've also looked at what does connectivity look at these schools, and not just at the physical schools, but for these kids at home. So we want to know if we give a child a device, are they going to have access at home? Is the school going to have to provide access for them at home? At what grade levels and what's available? So that's what we're, trying to dig down in this data and get an idea of where we are. So when we look at our schools, we know about 61% of our students have some type of internet at home. Now, we're not saying that is high-speed broadband, where we would like that to be the case, but they have some, it may just be cellular data that they have. And then we have 38.8% of our students who don't have any type of connectivity at home. When they go home, they take these devices. We've got to provide some kind of offline support for them to have educational opportunities. So that's where we're looking, and we're slowly pulling this down. And then we can see where, what does this look like across charter schools, across our private schools, across our public schools. And then again, drill down by school system and what school systems are providing to those students. So we can come in and we can look at, let's look at probably should just pick from the top. Well, since we looked at Ascension, we'll look at Ascension again. And so at Ascension Parish. And so you can see here, when we're looking at their students, they have, differing versions of who has confirmed internet, who has not, where that internet is needed, and then you can drill down by school as well if they've reported. So I think this is showing some other. So that's the first level of information we've looked at. The next thing what we've looked at is digital learning modes. So digital learning modes to us are the total number of schools, the total number of schools that have reported, how many of those schools are reporting that all their students are now back in school. And this data is changing regularly and daily now as we're getting there to see what students are going. So you'll start seeing we have a lot more students moving to in-person now than we did previously. We can see that both on our map to drill down on these schools. We can also look and click through to see these schools in our instructional mode list, as well as we have a way to drill down by our drop downs. We wanted to give people as many options as possible in this process to get more information about them. And then we have a look at an overall school system, is looking at how many students are in each of these modes and what's happening over time. And so we are looking across each of these to see how many are in person, how many are virtual. Earlier in the school year, you would have seen this virtual number be much, much higher. And now you're seeing a lot of the in-person combination start taking over and what that looks like at a grade level as well. So we can go through this and then dig down if you wanted to see, which schools, who's in person, who's not, or look at your particular school to see what your particular school. So we'll come here to back to Ascension Parish, and we can look at, now they've got a combination virtual and in person. You see the majority of their students are currently in person, but they still have, about 3,500 students that are in a virtual mode. And so this has helped us, like I said, answer public record requests, answer other data requests of what's happening without having to get all of this information, pull reports, and put it out there. We're also currently working with our Tableau group to build downloads and exports of this data to help with questions from researchers and other interested parties who are wanting to, dive more deeply into the data than what we've presented here. So this is kind of where we are, and we're looking to expand these and provide more information as we get different things, especially as we are receiving lots more CARES Act. We're trying to look at how we're spending that, how we're using that, and how we're improving the technology and connectivity of our students. And I probably went through that pretty fast. If anyone has any questions.
Carol, this is excellent. It's, you know, I think it's obviously it's very important for this type of analysis to be done as students are having to rely more and more on virtual learning. But even, you know, moving forward into returning to school, just having an idea of what their at-home situation looks like, as I would imagine having some type of online component to these to education is not going away at this point. We have one question that's come in, that there appears to be a simultaneous drop across in-person, virtual, and hybrid as far as the amount of students. And has that raised any questions whether or not there's been a decline in overall enrollment in student count?
So they have. So there has been a definite change in our student counts for this year, because a lot of students did choose to do home study. But as we have opened up and expanded our virtual options for schools, parents and students are much more interested to come back to the school and work in it. It's also helped us with, something we did not expect is, a lot of times you would have a school who had to close because of an outbreak. And, people are trying to go to that school. So we had parents calling saying, hey, we're looking at the site. We see the school has gone full virtual. Does that mean no one's up at that school? And we're like, correct. That school is currently closed, working virtually. You'll need to call them before heading there. So it was not a piece that we had expected to use this particular data for, but had gotten that response that it was helpful in telling, if someone was planning to go to a school, even from our office or teachers, we could see what was happening ahead of taking off and driving a couple of hours or doing something in there. We're also using this to gauge, what does it look like for next year even, and trying to see, how many students, one of the data points we want to look at is how many students want to stay virtual, how many students want to come back to in person, what other things can we provide through this information to help us make those decisions. It's also helping us decide things like when we're developing curriculum or resources, if the majority of our students are, as we look at across a lot of districts, when we go back to all of them on the devices, you'll see, we've got a mass number of Chromebooks in there. And so when you start looking at where do we need to ensure that our applications work, we need to be sure, especially when we're looking at students, that we absolutely ensure that everything works on a Chromebook, versus districts have pulled desktops out from their use just because of all the kind of cleaning and other priorities there. When I see there's a question, what has our response been? We have had fantastic response. They are so excited to get more of a visual view of where we are versus, we used to post a bunch of spreadsheets and other things that people just don't really follow. So that has been great, seeing how they're doing it, what they're wanting, and they're asking for more. We actually, we'd shared with our Tableau team that we had an outside private resource say, hey, we love these dashboards. Can you put more? We want to invest in you getting more data out there in this format. So we're looking at that as well. So it's been really great.
That's fantastic to hear. Looking ahead, I'd be very curious to see in a post-COVID world, but just having, this dashboard available with this type of data, any types of correlations to graduation rates or the college acceptance rates, and anything tied to the availability of these devices, the device availability, and the ability to connect to the internet from home. Is that the kind is that type of resource that's planned, whether it's for internal use only, or just something to make public, just to kind of further focus how important this type of technology is for students?
We are looking at how we're going to use it. I can say probably one of our biggest parts you're going to see coming out of this next few months is around when we look at the connectivity and the broadband of students. We have collected data of what services are available at each home of our students. And so we're working to kind of decide, where is a broadband not available? Where is broadband available, but not very effective, in the sense that they're getting, it's basically glorified dial-up. Also, and what is the cost of it? So, some of it is not, it's not that, sometimes it's that they can't afford it. Sometimes it's not available. Sometimes you can afford it, but it's not available, or it's some combination thereof that there's nothing to get. So we're working on those dashboards around broadband and more details, how that affects kids in learning. So it's great that they have a device. It's not so great that they take it home and now they're having to go, as we've seen on the news, having to go to the McDonald's or drive up the road or try to go sit outside their school to try to connect. We've got to solve all of these problems. So that's where this is getting, and it's helping us drive that message and the need for funding and focus.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all of the questions, but this is fantastic, and obviously, of huge importance to really everyone across the state. So thank you for sharing this with us, Carol.
No problem.
All right. So for our last presentation, we are going to be learning about Calculations 101. So we're going to be having Stuart Tinsley, who is a client success manager from our Tableau partner, XeoMatrix, go over some of the basics and how to do calculations within Tableau. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Stuart.
All right, thanks, Trevor. I'll share my screen here. Can Trevor, can you see this? Just want to be extra sure.
Yes, I can see it. I see the full PowerPoint though, and not just the presenter view.
Yeah, we go in presenter view. Actually, we can stay right here. I'm going to spend 2 seconds on the slide here. I just wanted to throw up an agenda because we're going to be talking about a lot of different calcs, and welcome everybody. This is my second time presenting, and we did formatting on the first session. So really excited about this session. We're going to cover what I think are the most common calculations. I've been using the product for 7 years now, and there's lots and lots of calculations, right? What I selected today are probably the most common ones that we'll see, especially in like an intro to calc session. So we're going to start talking about table calcs, Boolean calcs, case statements, date calculations, and then we'll finish with parameters if we have enough time. And you might be wondering, parameters, how does that, that's not a calculation, but actually a lot of parameters do involve calculations. So we're going to touch on that a little bit here. All right, so I'm going to get into Tableau Desktop here. And I'm going to start the timer here just so I know how far I'm going. First calculation we're going to look at is a table calculation. So Tableau has baked in calculations that we can leverage without having to do anything ad hoc. So if I look at something like, let's do a discrete month of our sales, and I'll put region under color. And let's say here I'm interested in something like a running total. So table calcs are baked into the product. So we don't have to do any sort of formulas. They're really on the fly, and they're meant to be. So we can come down here off of the measure and go to quick table calc, and we can select from a lot of different options here. So things like running total, percent difference, percent of total. So if I just select running total, I would get a running total of all of our regions here. And if I double click on that measure, we can see that that baked in formula is there, and we can even copy that into a calculation. So there are lots of calcs that we can get to from the quick table calcs. Really easy, just clear that, and go back to quick table calc. These are really useful, very quick, as they are labeled here, and we use them all the time. So that is a good place to start, just quick table calcs. Now, if we want to do an ad hoc calculation, there are actually 7 ways that we can build a calculation. There might be 8. I've only counted 7. I'm going to show you how to create a calculation in 7 different ways to start here. So the first way is if I just go into some white space right here and I right click, I can create a calculated field. That would be the first way to do it. The second way that's more common is this drop down arrow next to the search bar, create calculated field. Now we could also create a calculated field from the analysis tab up here. So analysis, create calculated field, another way to do it. And then the other ways that are less known are that we can create a calculated field off of a dimension or a measure. So if I go to region, right click, and I do create calculated field, I can start that calculation right there. The lesser unknown ways are actually from the row column shelf. I can click in here and start writing the calculation. So that would be a way to do it from the column shelf as well. We can actually click into the row or column, and then down here can be a way that we could write a calculation. So there are 7 ways that I know about. There might be 8, like I said, but 7 ways to actually just generate a calculated field. So the first calculation we're going to start with is a simple Boolean type of calculation. So I'll just call this, we'll call this sales above 100,000, okay? So a Boolean calculation is going to return a true or false. So if I just wanted to understand if my sales are over, or any sort of measure for that matter is over a given amount, I can just type sum of sales, then a greater than sign, and then the actual number I want to return. That's going to return a valid expression. This is key. If I removed one of these parentheses right here, this would make it a calculation that's not valid, and we can't use it in the view. I found that these error messages down below can be really helpful. They can a lot of times point you to where the calculation might have gone wrong. So if I just click here, it actually can take us, actually didn't do it in that situation, but we could, kind of go here, fix the parentheses, and we have a valid expression. Now, the other thing that I really rely on, if I was interested in some kind of function, some kind of calc that Tableau does, if you just start typing that expression, we're going to talk about a date difference calc in a little bit. This is a great example though. If I just wanted to understand what a date diff calc did, I can refer to the right side of the page here. And it first off tells us exactly what we can expect to return. So the difference between 2 dates. So you're subtracting 2 days. And then what I find really helpful is that it actually gives you an example of how to write that specific calculation. I found this to be extremely useful. I didn't have any sort of like heavy math or heavy like formula driven background. So it would kind of give us an idea of what we need to plug in here to make a valid calculation. So just typing out the function, looking at this dialog box over here. So let's go back to our calculation right here. The sum of sales greater than 100,000. So the minute I hit OK, the calculation becomes a measure or dimension that we can use dynamically. So if I were to throw on, let's say, subcategory and sales, and I want to use this calculation, I'll bring the view going this way. If I just drop this on the color, everything that is true is going to be orange. Everything that's false is going to be blue. So just a quick Boolean true false. It's one of the easiest calculations to write in Tableau. And I could also just drag this to filter and hit true. And that would only keep those subcategories that are above 100,000. It's one of the easiest calcs to write in Tableau. The next calc I want to talk about is an if-then statement. That would be sort of the next iteration of this. So let's bring subcategory back out on our view. And this time I'm going to write another calculation, but I'm going to use an if-then statement. I'm going to call this our sales goal. So same type of expression, but slightly different. So this time I want to understand if it's over 100,000, that's reaching our sales goal. If it's below our goal. So how would we do that? I start typing if, and then our sum of sales, and then greater than 100,000, right? So if the sum of sales is greater than 100,000, then, and you can see I'm starting to see those if and then statements pop up, and even the measures, and you can just hit enter and those pop up. If it's over 100,000, then above goal. Now you can use single quotes or double quotes here, and that's going to label when things are above goal or below goal. So I've got the first part of this written. I'm just going to do an else, and then I'm going to type in below goal. So anything that is below 100,000 is below our goal. Now I can see that I've got some errors. Again, I'll use that message. It needs an end statement. So anytime we use an if then, we have to end the statement. So now that's valid. And again, that becomes one of those calculations. It becomes something that we can use on the data pane here. I'll just drag that to color, and I can see what is above goal and what isn't. The same type of thing, I could bring that to our filter shelf and only select true, or above goal, excuse me. So if then statements can get very extensive if we wanted to. We could have in between certain amounts. It could be extrapolated really quite significantly. For sake of time, I won't go into that, but simple if then statement that we could write. Another one that is really commonly used is what Tableau calls, or what is known as a case statement. So let's say I wanted to, let's say region. I brought region out here, and instead of actually labeling the region, I wanted central to be a 1, I wanted east to be 2, south to be 3. I just wanted to have like numerical data point instead of the actual name of the region. So an easy way to do that, and we could use an if then statement as well, but a case statement. So I'm just going to type in case, and I'm going to reference the dimension, so region. And I'm just going to write something like when east, then 1. And we just continue that, when central, then 2. All right, I'll hit end. I'll just do for 2 of them. So we have case statement, when east, 1, when central, 2, and that could be anything. We don't have to just be 1. We could completely call this something different. So if I bring out my new region, we can see that that's going to link to east and central, and I could just finish that out, and we'd have 3 and 4. So a case statement can be a really quick way to kind of alter that dimension there. And we're going to use a case statement in a little bit to look at a parameter when we do that, and I'll show you how that looks. All right, so the next example I wanted to talk about are string calculations. The string calculations can be really helpful with data cleanup and data prep and just general navigation in the platform. So in the view here, I have product name. Product name, in some cases, can have a lot of information, right? So let's say in this example, I just want to pull out my product names that have some label of air filter. Like we can see this 3M replacement has air filter in there. How would I do that? Well, that's a contains. One of the ways we could do it is a contains calculation. So I'm gonna go to new calculated field. I'll call this contains. And again, using this, it returns true if the string contains the substring. So contains kind of gives you an idea of what to write here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is type in the dimension. So that's a product name. So if it contains, and then I'll just do our single quotes, air filter. Actually, let's do air cleaner. All right, that's a valid expression. And I can just bring that out to the view. One way to look at it, so anything that's true has the word air cleaner in it. I'll just throw it on the filter shelf and select true. And this should pull out all of those product names that have air cleaner. Really useful string calc. That's the contains function there. You could also wrap if statements in contains. So we did kind of a simple contains product name, and then what we wanted to pull out. You can also do, you can extrapolate on that and do if then statements as well. Awesome. So the next one I want to pull out or talk about is the split function. So I'm going to bring out an order ID here. All right, well, notice my order ID has a couple of dashes in it. And let's say I just wanted to pull out 2016 from this order ID. How would I, pull out just 2016 and kind of make our own column with it? So I can use the split function in this case. All right. Similar layout, similar format as the contains. I'm going to do split, and I'm going to reference the order ID. By the way, you can drag in your dimensions and measures from the data pane. So I can take in order ID, pop it right there. And then I'm going to do a dash because that's referencing where I want to pull out the information from the order ID. I'm going to type 2. All right, so the valid calc. And now if I bring this to the right of order ID, we should see that it brings out 2016. Now, if I want to go back and say, okay, I want to just pull out the back half of this order ID, so kind of the larger number here, just go back to my split. I want to reference the dash, and then I should be able to just type in 3, set apply, and that brings out the back half of that order ID. Really useful function, just like contains, if we need to do that data cleanup or data cleansing. Be really useful to do splits, and they can get pretty interesting, and you can create different columns with the data, just like that. All right, so in the same vein of string calculations, we have the min and max function. This can be really useful if we want to look at the first order dates or last order dates, or some first and last. We want to reference that. So if I just wanted to know what was the latest date that I have in my data here. So I could just type in max and then our order date. So this is going to return the last date, or the most recent date that we have in our data. Right? So bring that over here. 12/30/2019. So my data is a little old. And the same would work for that min function, for the minimum date. I go back here, edit that, bring in our min date. 1/3/2016. So a max date like that can be really useful if you ever want to have a timestamp on your data, just so users know when the data was refreshed or the latest date that is there. Using that max date and actually dropping that into a dashboard can be really helpful. You can just kind of identify what that latest date was in your data set. So min and max, really good functions to use in Tableau. Awesome. So on the same line of dates, I want to talk about the different date calculations that we have. So there are lots of different date calcs, and I'll talk about 3 of them today that are really common. The first one is if we wanted to make a date, right? In this data set right here, you can see that my order date is already, it's built in Tableau as the type of date that Tableau likes. Right, 11/8/2018. That's a date that Tableau is going to like, and it's going to let us build the hierarchy that we know to be available with dates where we can drill in. But sometimes data doesn't come in that format. So what if it came in a format where we had a year, a month, and we wanted to have that same functionality in Tableau? So I've got sales, I've got year, and I've got month. So that's when we can use a date calculation called make date in Tableau. So I'll call this make date. And I'm going to type in make date, and we can see that returns a date value constructed from a year and a month and a day. And it gives us that example. So what I'm going to do is type in year. I want to reference the year that I see in the data pane, so not this year. That's a different function. And I'll type in month. And then I don't have a day, so I can just type in 1. But if you had a day, you just drag that in here. Now I've got a valid calculation, and that's a date range that I can use. So let's bring out sales. Let's bring out our make date. Let's make this month. Make it a bar. And now I can see I can drill into that data and get that nice hierarchy that we see when we have a true date or a date that Tableau likes. So make date. The other one I want to talk about is the date difference. We briefly touched on this a minute ago. It's a really common calculation if we want to look at the difference in dates. So in this case, I have a ship date and an order date. And it could be with any two dates that we have. We just want to look at the difference in time. So what is our average days to ship? Might be a question that I have. So I'll do a new calculated field. I'll call this average days to ship. And the calculation is going to be written like this. It'll be date diff. And then I can define exactly where I want that average. Do I want it at the year level, the month level, the day? So I'll do day. And I'm just going to type in the first date, my order date, and then followed by my ship date. So I want my order date to be subtracted by the ship date. All right, so that's a valid expression. And that's going to generate a measure now. So that is the difference in that order date and that ship date. So let's bring out a specific dimension here. Let's maybe just look at region. Okay. Let's bring out average days to ship. Now I don't want to sum, I want an average. So let's make that quick change here. Right. So now I can see that my central region is my worst region in terms of time average to ship. And I can certainly layer in different product names here and see, okay, the VTech takes the longest to ship. And we could slice and dice that by the ship mode and kind of see what that looks like. So maybe standard class is probably, yeah, standard class happens to be our worst ship mode in terms of time to ship. So a date diff. Now we could also do, I had two dates in this example. And maybe you want to take a date difference against a date that you have and today. So what is today? So Tableau does have a function for that. It's just called today. So instead of ship date, I'll use today. Let's see if I can get that right. Okay. Let me just see if that calculation would have helped. That, yep, expected closing parentheses. Okay, so now I'm taking today against the time that the order was placed. You can absolutely bring that into your date diff calc. So that's going to return probably a much higher number here because this data is fairly old. Another trick that is, I learned this actually pretty recently. If I take out that calculation, I can actually drag my mouse over the whole expression here and bring that into the calculation window. So that's pretty cool. I learned that the other day. I didn't know you could do that. And then of course, change it to an average. So you can actually kind of test how that calc works. Another feature that I love in Tableau is the apply button. So if I were to make that change, like bring it back to ship date, for example, and I didn't want to close my window. I just wanted to see what the results would be. Hitting the apply button can be really helpful there as well. Cool. Trevor, how am I doing on time? I just want to make sure I'm not going over.
You have plenty of time. I actually think we'll probably end up wrapping up earlier than expected. We had blocked this off until 3:30.
Okay.
So yeah, you have as much time as you need.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to do. I'm going to show a parameter quickly here, and the parameter is a way that there's so many useful parameters that are out there. I'm going to talk about one today that's going to use a case statement, easy way to add some flavor to your reporting and introduce kind of a new concept. So let's say that I wanted to look at, let's do sales up here, and we'll do our subcategory. Okay. Let's say the use case I had was I want to give an end user the option to swap between sales and profit. I want a drop down, kind of like we have like with a filter, right? Just like that drop down filter we might get when we saw that Carol went through, right? How would I do that? So that could be a parameter that we build. And a parameter is two steps. Parameter, the first step is we have to create the parameter, and then we have to create the calculation so Tableau knows what to do with it. So for that example, sales and profit, swapping between those measures. I'm going to go up here to new or create parameter. You can also get to it down here, white space, create parameter. And this is going to act as our dropdown. So I'm going to say choose a metric. And the data type I want it to be in this case is going to be a string, because we can pick from integer and float and date. You can do date parameters, Boolean parameters. In this case, I want it to be a string. I just want to do a list. So I'm literally going to type in the exact name of my measure here that I want Tableau to toggle between. So the first one is sales, and the next one is profit. All right, and that looks to be good. I'll hit OK. And I can show the parameter. That's our dropdown. Now, nothing is going to work yet. As we can see, nothing's changing yet because we have to write the calculations. So Tableau knows that we have to switch between the sales and the profit. Easy way to do this sort of calculation is to go back and use that very similar to that case statement. So we'll do a new calculated field. We'll call this choose a metric. I'm going to say case, and we're going to reference that parameter. Drag it in there. So now Tableau knows the reference parameter, and then we're going to tell it what to do. So when sales, then sales. So sales from the measure from the data pane. When profit, then profit. Profit from the data pane. And we have to end case statements. So I'll hit end. And that's valid. And all I'm going to do is take that metric that we just built, I'm going to swap it in on top of sales. So now when I go back to our metric, choose profit, it's going to change our view. And we could easily add more. If I wanted to go back in here, and let's say I like how this looks, I want to give, maybe a user said, please add quantity. I'll go in here and just add quantity. Is that okay? That'll show up immediately. Go back to my metric, and I obviously have to add quantity. So just a space, when quantity, then quantity. Hit apply. Now I can look at quantity. And I also have that filter for region. So if I want to look at quantity just by the central region, we've got that all teed up to do that. So case statements are key. You could also do an if statement to control that parameter as well. I just found case statements are really easy if that was my use case, just kind of swapping between our different measures. And you want to be sure that you match exactly what your dimensions and measures are called here. So if I had, you know, in my calculation or in the list of values, if there was a lowercase, you just want to be careful about the case sensitivity. Because sometimes typically the issue I see when a parameter doesn't work is because you might have used like a lowercase, just something to watch out for. The other thing I want to just mention very quickly is if we go back to our choose a metric. If you ever wanted to add in additional context on your calculation, like let's say you had a really advanced calculation or even something simple and it just wasn't inherently obvious to an end user, someone using Tableau Desktop, for example, you can do a double slash, and this would allow you to type any information that might be helpful. So when someone comes into that calculation, they're able to see that. I've seen that be really useful when we, you know, if you just wanted to provide that extra context. The last calculation I'll talk about really quickly, it sounds like I have a little time, would be you could do calculations that don't have to return any sort of value. They can just be a label. For example, if I had a dashboard and I wanted, you know, if end users maybe had questions about something, I could come over to a new sheet and leverage a calculation and a tooltip to help guide users along the way. So I'll show you how that looks. I'm gonna do a new calculated field. I'll call this my question mark. And then just have to do a single quote and a question mark like that. That's a valid calculation. And we could do anything. We could type text in here with single quote, double quotes. So you can use calculations as labels as well. So if I use that question mark and I bring it to text, let's increase the size of this real quick. Maybe make it 20. Right. I'll hide the sheet. So now I just have a question mark, and I could float that sheet in there. And I could also just use the tooltip to, again, refer to the below chart for more information. So we could type in anything we wanted to here. So when a user hovers over that in the dashboard and kind of float that in the right corner, perhaps, they could get more information. Maybe it just helps you from having to ask questions or people coming to you to ask questions. So easy calc, just single quote, question mark, throw it on text, and then add some context to your tooltip there. I love that tip, and just using, you'll notice sometimes when, if I were to bring out like only one measure, for example, let's do region here. I'll put this on the color. Like it doesn't explicitly, I don't explicitly know that it's sales right there because I only have one measure. It's not until I have another measure that we see those headers. Like one way to kind of tackle that is just having a calculation like that, and just bring that onto the column shelf. There we go. It's a little quick trick. That kind of gets through all the content I have. I'm happy to take any questions and look at more examples.
This is great, Stuart.
Yeah.
I think this is something that the calculations are obviously a huge portion of being able to create more advanced dashboards within Tableau. What would you suggest for people trying to get additional training on calculations, after today's session?
Definitely. There are all of the functions are documented. They're really well documented on Tableau's website. You can actually just get PDFs of how all the functions use or can be used. Certainly the training videos I find are really helpful. They do a great job of kind of going from intro to the more advanced calcs, because there's some that we didn't necessarily talk about today. Yeah, I think the community is always great. If you have a specific, formula that you're trying to write and just taking that to the web. For example, like I think I did this exact one when I was first learning Tableau. So date diff calc, because that takes us to our date functions first off. All the different ones that we have. These resources are so expansive. And then I can go over to the community page. Calculate difference in sequential dates. And that would be, something I might look at. Or here's, so many resources out there to learn. And just trying new calculations. I think that's one of the best things you do is try different ones and use the editor to help where there are errors, and you'll start to really get the hang of how calculations work, and it becomes, like anything in Tableau, it just becomes muscle memory.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing all of that. And in this last closing session, I'll highlight a couple of those training resources you had mentioned as well. But I think that was about it. So thank you again, Stuart. If there's any other questions, we will be holding open QA after this next series of announcements. So go ahead and put them in. But I think we'll go ahead and start wrapping up here. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor.
All right, so closing things out, I'm going to just share a couple of resources that I want everyone to be aware of for next steps. So following today's session, you will be receiving an email with all of the resources that we have covered today, including a link to the education dashboard. But you'll also be receiving another user group feedback survey, just like the one we did in November. This is very important for us to continue these quarterly user groups. And just as a reminder, the calculations training that we just did, it was a direct result of the last one. So please fill it out there. It's really short, and we really appreciate your feedback. And I also want you to go ahead and bookmark the Team Tableau site and register for the Tableau Government Summit. But again, both of these will be in my follow-up email. But if you haven't seen the Team Tableau site already, this is a fantastic enablement resource for you as a Tableau user. And it's something that is going to be continually updated. So you can see when the next user groups are, any news about Tableau, and there are a lot of sections that are continuing to be built out upon that can help you becoming more proficient. So like Stuart had mentioned, as far as training, we have a lot of training videos available, and you can see some of our paid training options as well. I highly recommend the e-learning. As a side note, it's only $10 a month and gets you access to hours and hours of high quality content that includes data sets to follow along with. So that's a great way to try and get more proficient with calculations or anything else Tableau related. This is also where the visual style guide that Chris shared at the beginning of today's call will live. So this will be uploaded here shortly. And I wanted to give you a sneak peek at this community section. We are creating a forum for use as part of the Tableau community that will be living here for you to do. So that way, any questions that you have related to Tableau, or whether it's a specific Louisiana question or just in general, you can start posting here, and that way it will be available for all Louisiana users in the future. Because if you have a question, I guarantee someone else does too. So make sure this is bookmarked. Every single user group we have will be continuing to reference this as it is continuing to evolve. And the last thing I wanted to highlight is go ahead and save the date and register for the 2021 Government Summit. This is an extremely exciting event that features leadership from both state and federal governments, and talking about how Tableau is being used, and it's all related to government. So anyone on today's call will find this useful. And if you can't make it, register anyways, because there will be a recording. That is all that I had for today. So I'm going to go ahead and stay on in case there's any additional questions. But thank you all for attending the second quarterly Louisiana Tableau user group, and be on the lookout for both my follow-up email and announcements about the third one in a few months. Thank you again.